So I just wanted to share a little bit of a build that I've been having fun with this past week, and again I've got to apologise for the croaky voice. We've still got that cold that keeps on giving, but this one all starts with an unexpected and again an unlikely source of Strand subclass synergy with the Riskrunner. Again, we're leaning into some Strand subclass synergy, but with a weapon that isn't always going to be on everyone's radar, but does have that synergy, and it actually makes a ton of sense when you think about it, especially when paired with the damage resistance offered by Woven Mail, and it's all thanks to the Superconductor perk. Now, Riskrunner isn't going to get its moment in the sun this season because, like we know, the artifact is all based around Radiant, Sunshot, Polaris Lance, but because of the nature of this season, there is actually a ton of enemies that are taken, that are scorn, that are going to dish out arc damage, and these in turn are automatically going to trigger the effects from Riskrunner and make you somewhat of a tank, especially in the coil and the dungeon this season. Now, because of that, this makes Arc Conductor extremely good. It's going to help you to take out a ton of enemies, and it actually has a ton of great synergy with the Strand subclass setup, and it's going to be able to make you tangles, it's going to be able to unravel targets, and it's going to be able to make you shut down areas, deal with champions, and just help you to dominate the entire battlefield. Now, Arc Conductor is going to give you a 10% damage boost, but it's also going to give you a massive 50% damage reduction to incoming arc damage. Now, this stacks on top of the high resilience stat, which with any good Titan and some bad ones too, you should be running that maximum 100 resilience so that you're getting your class ability back instantly, but it just makes a ton of content super easy. And now, because of the nature of Riskrunner, especially when you're taking that incoming arc damage and Superconductor is active, you're just going to wipe out tons of enemies. That chaining arc damage is going to do the business, and it's going to help, especially with this build, to just clear out waves of enemies. Now, where does it all pair with this build? Well, basically we're going to be setting it up by using some Siphon mods to create Orbs of Power. Obviously you're going to want the Arc Siphon mods, but we're also going to be creating tons of Orbs of Power from suspended targets, and that's all thanks to the Thread of Wisdom, which is going to create Orbs of Power on defeating suspended targets. Now, a lot of these suspended targets are going to be dealt with by Riskrunner. Hopefully, if you've managed to proc Arc Conductor, then they're going to be wiped out instantly, but if not, you're still going to be able to mow them down because they're basically incapable of dealing any damage to yourself at that point. And then collecting an Orb of Power is going to grant you Woven Mail, and that is from the Thread of Warding. Now, Woven Mail offers a massive damage reduction from any incoming damage that isn't a critical shot from enemies. Now, obviously in PvE that's not something that you're massively worried about, but it does make a difference, and especially if you've got that Arc Conductor going, you're basically not going to take any arc damage whatsoever with this massive, pretty much 100% damage reduction at that point. And you'll be surprised, there is a ton of enemies, especially in this season's content, that are going to dish out arc damage, and you're just going to be able to roam around just freely and do what you need to do to complete any of the mechanics in the dungeon or in the coil activity. It basically makes this Titan build just absolutely god tier. Now, we can go even further from that by obviously adding in the Banner of War aspect, which, I mean, all good Titans are basically running this at the minute, but in this build it probably is a little bit overkill, but I think you just can't go wrong with it. It doesn't really matter what you're trying to achieve with your Berserker Titan. Getting Banner of War up and then keeping that extended by literally doing any other final blow, which Riskrunner is going to be able to extend that if it comes down to it. And a Banner of War times 4, you've basically got unlimited health, you've got health for your allies, and you're also going to deal 10% increased sword damage as well as increased melee damage as well. Now, that 10% sword damage is going to be really good, especially when paired with the Strand sword from the dungeon, the Dragon Cult Sickle. I've been using this a little bit. I know that the caster frames are everyone's favourite, on definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but I've got one with Demolitionist and Chain Reaction, and when it comes to cutting down the suspended targets, this one just makes light work of everything. Whether you're going to use the light attack or use the ranged heavy attack, it's going to destroy everything, and it's going to give you a ton of grenade energy back as well. Now, the reason we want grenade energy back is because we're going to lean into our grapple melee attack. Through the grapple, if you're using that melee attack at the end, that is going to offer you to be able to unravel targets. Now, unravel is one of the main things that you want to get going in any Strand build. and that's because it's just going to deal massive damage over time, and it's going to go and affect other nearby enemies as well, which chains into that Strand shutdown nature that we've been going on with a few of these builds that we've covered recently. And it pairs perfectly with Riskrunner at the minute, and unraveled enemies will always create a tangle, but you can even do that even again through Riskrunner by having the Thread of Transmutation equipped, which means that as long as you've got Woven Mail active, any weapon final blow will create a tangle as long as that tangle cooldown isn't active. Now, these tangles, you can pick them up, you can throw them and grapple onto them. There's a ton of movement tech that you can do with them, but mainly in this build we're just going to be using them just to literally throw at everything and just create that bonus damage from having a tangle in play. There's not really too much that we're going to be doing with them in terms of making them do anything special, but they're an extra damage dealing option, and they just add into the Strand shutdown nature of this build. Now, the main synergy that we're leaning into with this Titan build, it basically is the old school Strand setup of just getting everything suspended, shutting down areas. It's perfect for dealing with unstoppable champions, and the best way to do that is by using the exotic, the Abiant Leap, which is going to massively improve the Drenger's Lash aspect. Again, as well, with this exotic you do get Woven Mail, but as standard, so that again is going to lean into the Thread of Transmutation to again allow you to create tangles pretty much on demand whenever you want them, and you can even go in there from there to do the Frenzied Blade melee attack. Obviously you get a few charges of this, but the Titan one is probably one of the strongest ones here, especially when combined with the Banner of War. And an underrated aspect I think about the Strand melee on Titan is that it's going to sever targets. Now, like we said, we've already got a massive damage reduction from Riskrunner, we've got a massive damage reduction from Woven Mail, and now on top of the healing from Banner of War, we're going to be severing targets, and these severed targets basically just do 40% less damage to you, 40% less damage output that is. So on top of all that damage reduction, they're doing less damage, they're basically not even going to be tickling you at that point, they're just literally just not even going to cause you any issues at all. This whole build, I mean, it's a little bit niche, but it is what it is, and it's all centered around dealing with just shutting down enemies. You've got tons of options for suspending targets, you've got options for unraveling targets, you've got options for severing targets. Anything that's Strand related, it's going on, and then you've got a lot of great options with your weapons. Like we say, Riskrunner is going to be excellent, especially if you get that superconductor going. But we can also pick some of these suspended targets off. The sniper rifle from the dungeon, I know it's not everyone's favourite with it being a rapid fire frame, but it's slowly becoming one of my favourites at the minute. I managed to snag a decent one that I've been enjoying recently, and that's because it comes with hatchling in the third column. So you can use this sniper rifle then to just basically pick off the suspended targets that you've got from Abiant Leap. Obviously you're going to need precision final blows, but I mean, if they're suspended, getting a precision shot with this sniper rifle isn't going to be too difficult, and that's going to spawn a Threadling, and this in turn is just going to go and take out any of your other enemies that are suspended, or anything else nearby that maybe didn't get suspended by your Abiant Leap. And then we've got Deconstruct, which I think this is going to be a slept on perk for a long time. Mainly just because of the nature of how it does its increased damage, but once you get it going, it does 40% increased damage to targets. Now I know it's probably not as popular as Surrounded, which is a little bit easier to get going, but in certain situations, especially in like the dungeon on that final boss, Deconstruct, it's going to return ammo to the magazine, it's going to give you a 40% damage increase. I don't know what isn't to like about that perk at the minute. I think just because it's so new and there's not a massive amount of areas where you can use it to get that benefit, but I like it, I enjoy it, and this sniper rifle's it's been doing bits for me so far. And it also even leans back into the new origin trait for these dungeon weapons, where by destroying constructs or vehicles you're going to get a bonus to your reload speed and charge rate. Obviously these Strand weapons, it doesn't really matter what you use in the heavy slot. I mean, we're going for a little bit of ad clear with the sword, but obviously you can use the grenade launcher from the Root of Nightmares raid if you really want. Envious Assassin Surrounded, still a really good perk, great for some low-key good boss DPS, especially in solo content. And also the Semiotician rocket launcher bipod, Again, slept on, but still really good for dealing good one-off high burst damage. And these strand weapons, again, lean back into the artifact. Again, picking up an orb of power is going to grant your strand weapons unraveling rounds, and then dealing any damage to unraveled targets. Like we say, we've got that grapple melee going to unravel targets and unraveling rounds from the artifact. These do have the potential to spawn a Threadling, so again, Riskrunner could potentially spawn you a Threadling. We're not lying when we said it was Threadrunner. It really can do the business. It's going to create tangles. It's potentially going to create threads. It's got everything that you need to do in terms of builds this season with Riskrunner and this strand setup. I mean, again, this one is a little bit outside the box, but I think it's perfect for what we've got going on at the minute. I mean, you're probably not going to want to exactly take this build into Grandmaster Nightfalls, mainly because Riskrunner doesn't just offer you that extreme synergy that you need in terms of dealing with the champions and the amount of champions and higher health enemies, especially this season. But I mean, look out for any changes with the artifact. I mean, we've got an extended season coming up. Could SMGs maybe get a rotation in terms of dealing with champions? I don't know, but it's one to keep an eye out for potential future seasons anyway. But as for other mods, you're definitely going to want to have your strand weapon surge mods going on, bomber and outreach on your class item, and then maybe look at momentum transfer or something for your gauntlets. There's a few options you can look at, but I think in terms of the build, it's all about suspending. It's all about getting that Riskrunner damage reduction going, and just basically being a Titan, being on the front foot and just taking the fight to your enemies. Once again, I've got to apologise for the croaky voice. We've just got that cold that keeps on giving. But thank you very much for the support recently, and I hope you enjoyed this quirky build. Thank you very much.